Starting off with the worst evolution in the game, we got the Evolved Ice Spirit. Pretty much ever since this was added to the game, it has been the weakest one. It doesn't even matter now that it's a 2-cycle evolution instead of 3. I think the ability itself is just not that strong. A lot of times it refreezing a unit isn't really getting a lot of value, and it oftentimes misses and jumps on the wrong thing, going to complete waste, or your opponent can easily block it with something. It also doesn't really have a stat boost, so things like Log take it out just like the regular Ice Spirit, and you're just better off using a much stronger evolution inside of your deck and not wasting one of your slots on the Evo Spirit. The second worst evolution is going to be the Evolve Royal Recruits, which is pretty surprising because they used to be one of the strongest evolutions in the game, but then what happened is they kept getting nerfed over and over, so now they pretty much have no health boost and no damage boost, so you can essentially think of them as just regular recruits that charge when they get their shield taken off of them, and because they don't really have any stat boosts anymore, that means they're going to be relatively easy to deal with. On top of that, with the Dagger Duchess in the game now, she's incredible against recruits, which has really toned them down as well in the meta, which is why they are in a really rough spot at the moment. The Evolved Goblin Barrel is the newest evolution. I think most people know by now it is one of the worst, which is also why it is going in F tier. I think the biggest problem for the Evolved Goblin Barrel is most people know where the real one is going to be and where the fake one is going to be, because most of the time people want to play the real Goblin Barrel on the lane where they've dealt more damage in, and then the fake one will oftentimes be on the opposite lane, so it's so easy for your opponent to know where it's going to be. On top of that, you're just much better off using the Evolved Knight or the Evolved Tesla or the Evolved Skeletons inside of your bait deck simply because they are just much stronger evolutions compared to the Evolved Goblin Barrel. We're going to start off C tier with the Evolved Battle Ram. Now, the Evolved Battle Ram can actually be decent if you can find a way to reach the tower, but that's the tricky part because there's so many ways you can knock it back with things like a Log, of course the Little Prince ability, and then there's a lot of stuns too, like the Evolved Zap, the Evolved Tesla, which are very prevalent in the meta. And on top of that, it isn't really that versatile. For the most part, you can only use it inside of P.E.K.K.A. Bridge Spam, and then the other thing too is the Dagger Duchess just absolutely melts it, which is another problem for the Evolved Battle Ram too. The Evolved Wall Breakers are up next. They do a lot of damage if they connect, but getting them to connect is such a big issue, especially with the Dagger Duchess in the game. If you're using the Dagger Duchess, you can practically ignore them and they won't even reach the tower. And if you're against the Cannoneer, if the Evolved Wall Breakers are split, you can ignore them and they won't connect either. So pretty much if you're using the Evolved Wall Breakers, they're only going to be good in some situations, and you have to get a tank down in front of them every single time, or they're pretty much going to go to complete waste at the moment. The Evolved Firecracker is also going in C tier. She recently got a rework that ended up being a small nerf to her because she doesn't have a health boost any longer, and because of how prevalent arrows are in the meta, she dies to arrows now just like the regular Firecracker. Even though she is annoying sometimes because her spark stats were buffed, overall she's fairly easy to deal with if you know what you're doing, and also because she activates King Towers, she's limited in what decks she's going to be able to be played in. We're going to be closing out C tier with the Evolved Mortar. The Evolved Mortar can get pretty good value on defense and also pressure pretty effectively on offense, but it is definitely a bit worse now ever since they removed its health boost, because now it is essentially a regular mortar that just fires a goblin a tad bit faster. But because there's a lot of tanks in the game at the moment, it's going to be fairly easy to block, and then things of course like Earthquake and Void are going to take it out very effectively because now it has the same health as the original mortar. We're going to start off B tier with the Evolved Bats. These things can end up getting so much value healing, especially when your opponent doesn't have a good spell in cycle to get rid of them, and even if they do have a spell to kill them, you can often bait that spell and then get value with something else that requires a spell which your opponent won't have in that case, which is why these things pair very well inside of Lava Hound decks, Giant Graveyard, and also with the Mega Knight. Even though the Royal Giant had its health boost taken away, it has still proven to be an average evolution at the moment with a good amount of people running him. I think the reason why is because his ability can be quite useful in a lot of situations. When you normally would be able to just play a ground card on him, which would normally take out the regular RG, it's not going to work because the Evolve RG is going to keep knocking it back. So now you're going to be forced to go in for a building or a flying unit, which limits the amount of options you have to defend the Evolve RG. But with that being said, of course, buildings are going to take it out very, very easily. Next up is the Evolve Archers. Kind of like the Evolve Firecracker, after their rework, they ended up being a bit worse because the Evolve Archers also die to arrows now, and because of how many people are using arrows, that's going to be a nice and easy way to take them out. Even though they deal a bit more damage now, they are definitely slightly worse. But with that being said, they end up getting so much value, especially on defense, which is why you often see them inside of things like Giant Graveyard and Expo quite a lot. Closing out B tier with the Evolved Valkyrie, ever since they gave her a hit points bonus, now she's significantly better than the regular Valkyrie, and she just gets so much value, especially defensively because of her Tornado. She pretty much can stop just about any ground win condition you can think of right in their tracks before they get any damage on top of the tower. That's how useful she is in a lot of situations and why she's almost always played inside of lava decks now. We'll begin A tier with the Evolved Zap. Even though it ended up getting a pretty big nerf where its second and third strike have dealt significantly less damage, it has still remained to be an absolutely incredible evolution, especially inside of beatdown decks. It almost feels like a must-have. It is used all the time in P.E.K.K.A, Lava Hound, Giant, Golem, and pretty much every beatdown deck, you're going to be able to use it if you want to. It's just so useful to have that stun, especially if you're playing against an Inferno Tower or an Inferno Dragon. Evolved Barbs are going in A tier too, and kind of like the Evolved Zap, they are also absolutely incredible inside of beatdown decks. In fact, you often see the Evolved Barbs and the Evolved Zap together in things like Lava Hound and Golem. And if you're not using the Evolved Valk inside of Lava, you're definitely using the Evo Barbs. They're also great inside of Giant Graveyard, Giant Sparky, and pretty much any beatdown deck you want to use them in. The fact that they don't die to Fireball like the regular Barbarians do is so clutch. And then when they start attacking, they get raged, and everything is just insane. So many interactions are much better when they're raged up. Now, I want to make this very clear. As of recording this video, at this point in time, the Evolved Knight would be an S tier, but balance changes are coming in a week, and a lot of people watching this video are going to be watching this video a lot later than I recorded it, so I'm doing a tiny bit of a prediction. The Evolved Knight, I think, is going to be A tier after the nerf he's going to get in about a week. He's essentially going to have his health boost completely removed, so now he's going to be basically a regular knight, except when he's walking. So when he's walking, he's still going to have that shield ability, which of course makes him very, very tanky. But if you stop him with just skeletons or goblins after the bounces go live, he's practically going to be a regular knight, making him a lot worse for sure, even though he'll still be strong and an above average evolution without a doubt. We're going to start S tier with the Evolved Tesla. Even though the Evolved Tesla, just like the Evolved Knight, is getting a nerf, I still think the Evolved Tesla is going to end up remaining in S tier, and I still think it'll be very, very broken. Its stun damage is getting nerfed slightly, and the stun duration is getting nerfed, but I still think that stun is just going to provide so much value, resetting units, causing them to retarget, just defensively getting an absurd amount of value, especially because it still has that death shockwave. So once it breaks, you're getting an additional shock too. Getting into our top three now, we got the Evolved Wizard. Definitely one of the strongest evolutions at the moment. The reason that makes it so good is obviously the shield. It doesn't die to arrows or log. So basically, if you drop a wizard on your side of the map, it is impossible for your opponent to kill it with most spells. And even if they have a void, there's an anti-void placement you can do next to your tower. And on top of that, when the shield breaks, you get a massive explosion, dealing damage to units and pushing them back, which is why the wizard is used so much at the moment, especially inside of Giant, Royal Giant, and P.E.K.K.A decks. The second best evolution in the game is going to be the Evolved Bomber. One of the things that makes it so good is its versatility. You can use it in a ton of different decks. You can use it in Giant. You can use it in Royal Giant. You could use it in Lava. You could use it in Golem. You can use it in cheaper decks like Expo, Goblin Drill, you name it. So much variety, and it is practically a win condition because if someone plays something in front of their tower, you can play it at the bridge, get it lined up, and if you have a tank in front of it, it's going to keep throwing bombs, accumulating so much damage on your opponent's towers, and it has practically replaced Magic Archer, and it is why it is just much better than Magic Archer, because it basically does what Magic Archer does for only 2 elixir. And lastly, guys, we got the Evolved Skeletons, which I think are the best evolution in the game at the moment. And some proof of that is last season on Ladder, 6 players in the top 10 in the world, 6 of the top 10 finishers were playing the Evolved Skeletons. And it's no surprise why. For only 1 elixir, if you do not have a spell and cycle to take them out, they oftentimes can get 10 elixir or more worth of value. In fact, they can literally take out a whole tower on their own. There's even some clips I'm sure you guys have seen where they take a tower and then proceed to 3 crown because the opponent doesn't have anything for them. Of course, in some situations, they can be taken out almost instantly, but because they're oftentimes played inside of cycle decks, you have so many opportunities throughout the match to get value out of them, and oftentimes can win games alone with them or defend a whole push with them, which is why they are insanely broken. Let me know what you guys think about my ratings. What would you guys change? Make sure to like the video if you guys enjoy it, subscribe if you guys are not subscribed already, and you can use creator code BOSS to support me in any Supercell game.